Welcome to the Base Path Podcast, brought to you by New England Baseball Journal. I'm your host, Dan Guttenplan. Today we have one of the rising stars in the coaching profession in New England, Sacred Heart coach Pat Egan, who has taken the program to unprecedented heights here in the last 2 years. Pat, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so last year, Sacred Heart set a program record for wins with 35 wins, and they returned to the final round of the NEC Championship for the first time since 2017. I was kind of looking back to when you were hired, some of the stories that we did and some of the stories that, any media outlets did when you were hired. So the program was really down. I think you had won 12, or Sacred Heart had won 12 games before you came over from Quinnipiac. What were kind of the first steps that you wanted to take to really kind of put your fingerprints on the program?
Well, the first one that I knew right away was I had to surround myself with good people. So finding and kind of rounding out the coaching staff was going to be the most important thing to start off with. And the first hire that I made was TK Kiernan. He was an assistant coach with Sacred Heart for about 8 years prior to me getting the job. And he had taken a year off and he had some other ventures going on. He coached a little bit of travel ball. And as this whole thing kind of unfolded throughout the interview process, he had reached out to me and said that he wanted to get back into college coaching. And, when I had gotten to know him on the recruiting road, and I got to know him well over, 7 or 8 years that, we crossed paths. And, I knew him as not only a great coach, but a phenomenal recruiter, but even more so just like a really good person. So I knew that was exactly who, I wanted to hire. And then the next guy was Isaiah Dubon, who was a kid coming out of his playing career. He played 4 years at Sacred Heart. And then he played one graduate year with NJIT. And he had actually gotten hired probably 2 weeks before I got the job. And funny thing with that was Isaiah and I was still at Quinnipiac. I'm being interviewed by Sacred Heart. He had just gotten the volunteer job with Sacred Heart. And we had run into each other at a recruiting event in Massachusetts. And, I just obviously started talking with him, getting to know him a little bit. And little did he know he was kind of going through a pseudo job interview as I, hadn't met him before. So got a chance to kind of chop it up with him for half an hour, 45 minutes. So when I did get the job, I already kind of had some familiarity with him and knew I wanted to keep him on staff. And, TK knew him very well, coached him a little bit at Sacred Heart. So being able to hire those two guys right off the get-go was probably the most important thing that I did. And then it was like, I'm going to reach out to all the players. I called and texted pretty much everyone on the roster at that point. Just wanted to get a pulse on, some of the things that they felt that, needed to get changed, some things that needed to improve. Kind of wanted to let them know where I come from, my background, and what my philosophy is. And that was kind of what kickstarted this whole thing. And from there on out, it was being able to slowly implement what we wanted to build this program out to be, and the foundation that we would see to be, lead us to hopefully being successful.
Yeah. When you reached out to the players, what was some of the feedback you got in terms of things that needed to change or improve?
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, I don't think it's in particular just Sacred Heart. It's just when any type of program or team is going through any type of losing, I think you can probably nitpick at just about everything, right? And at the end of the day, it was just being able to build the program up, get the guys invested in not only themselves, each other, but caring about the program and wanting to see them be successful. And to be honest with you, like, when I talked to them, and even when we had our first team meeting on campus, like, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the past. Like, I didn't want to know too much about it. I just wanted to get a feel for just some of the things that the players and the guys felt like maybe needed some change. But at the end of the day, it was about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. And even throughout the course of that first year, I never wanted to reference the previous year, whether it was how many wins or any of the things that came up. It was more about like moving forward with what this program was going to be in the future. And I think that was part of the reason that we started to have some success early on, because I think it was just this fresh start, fresh slate, and we're going to leave all that other stuff in the past.
Yeah, and you went from 12 wins to 28 wins in your first season as the head coach. It's interesting. It sounds like you kind of, almost like reinvested in the players that were already on the roster by, reaching out to all those guys and kind of making sure, they were solid, seeing how they wanted to be coached. And then also, both your assistants had ties to the program, one as a former assistant, one as a former player. You hear a lot of these new coaches now, regardless of the sport, that get hired and they're like, hey, I'm going to clear out the roster. I'm going to get my own guys, whether I'm recruiting them through the transfer portal or, high school juniors and seniors. And then also, I want to kind of put my own staff in place that doesn't have ties to a program that just won, 12 games last year. Was there any reluctance by you to say, I'm going to bring guys back who have ties to the program rather than just start fresh?
No, I mean, again, like I had already known TK for a long period of time, so I knew who he was. I trusted him with his word, and especially when he vouched for Isaiah. And I kind of told him that I wanted good people around me, so it wasn't. I wasn't concerned with that. And then when it came to the roster, I was familiar with a lot of these guys, whether it was I recruited a couple of them, or I saw them on the road. So I had a pretty good sense of where we were from a talent perspective. And then when you also look at, where we were from an experience standpoint, like we had 17 seniors or graduate kids going into that year. So you're kind of saying to yourself, like, you're not going to be able to replace that if you decide to cut half of them. And I also know that there was probably a few of the better players that got dinged up. Like, for example, Sam Mongelli, who ended up being, a 10th round draft pick to the Los Angeles Dodgers after his senior year. He wasn't healthy for most of his career. Justin Jordan, who, almost set the program record for hits, and he finished with, I think, over 260 career hits. Same thing, like he was in and out of the lineup quite a bit. So when you start to really dive into some of the reasons that they may not have been successful, it's not always just for lack of talent. And I also felt like if we were going to build this thing up the right way and we were going to gain the trust of the players, like this is going to be a step that we were going to have to take. Where we're going to take our lumps at certain points of the year where we're going to have to be okay with it. That was one of those things we went into that year kind of saying, like, this is who we have and we're going to make the best of it. And we're going to find a way to scratch and claw our way to a few wins and, kind of set this program off in the right trajectory. And that has kind of set the foundation for where we are as a program. We don't spend a lot of time in the transfer portal. Like, you can go through our roster and you can see that we don't have a lot of turnover year to year. Listen, we're gonna dabble in the portal when we need to, because you're gonna have to replace guys that may leave because they're looking for more playing time, or obviously you're gonna graduate some guys, or if guys get drafted, you're always gonna have some holes that you do need to fill. But for us, we're gonna recruit primarily 95% high school kids. That's how we're gonna build our program out. You can call it old school, right? Because that doesn't seem to be the model nowadays in any sport, but that's kind of the foundation of what we wanted to do, and we felt like starting out with keeping this roster, intact and being able to build the trust up from our guys from day one was really important.
Yeah, so you had a ton of guys to kind of replace. It sounds like when you first took over, you had a lot of seniors and graduate students. What was kind of the philosophy behind bringing in recruits? Like, what is your recruiting philosophy? Where are you finding guys? What kind of guys are you looking to recruit?
Yeah, that summer, that was a wild summer because I officially got the job on August 8th, so trying to put together an entire recruiting class in August isn't usually the best recipe for success. And it's not something that we look to always do in the future, but I had spent enough time on the road, to get a really good feel of the talent in the area. And listen, this was also still the apex of, the transfer portal with all the kids in college still having their COVID years left. So I think as the first couple of years started to unfold with the portal, like, coaches saw an opportunity to continue to bring in experienced guys that were older. And I think that was the way they kind of saw their recruiting model moving forward at that point in time. So for us, we got lucky because there were still a lot of talented kids left on the board. And so as we started to look for whatever the holes were that we needed to fill with the guys that we needed to replace, it was just trying to target the right kids. And the cool thing is that Isaiah saw a lot of the same guys that I did because we were at the same events together. So being able to kind of put that class together, it was definitely a little nerve-wracking because you weren't exactly sure what you were going to get, because some of these guys we didn't see as frequently as we wanted to. But once we kind of got the whole class solidified and we look back on it, like especially nowadays, like we did a really good job in that recruiting class. But from a recruiting philosophy standpoint, like we're going to stick in the Northeast region. That's kind of been our MO. We have definitely reached out into Massachusetts a little bit more. We've gotten into Northern New Jersey a little bit more. So we're going to kind of try and spread our wings a little bit all over the place. But from a recruiting standpoint, what's really important for us, and this is part of the reason that I really enjoy recruiting high school kids, is because I want to see our guys play a lot. Like I really want to get a good understanding of not only their talent level, their skill set, but just kind of getting to watch how they play the game of baseball and see if that's going to translate into the way that we want it to look on the field. And that's been the most important piece for us, is identifying the right kids. Is we want to get out and we want to see them play a lot. And as you know, like the summer baseball, these kids are playing, 50 or 60 games over the course of the summer. So if we need to sit and squat and watch a kid for 10 to 12 games and watch them for 25 at bats, like we will do that. Not every kid falls under that umbrella where we have to watch them that much, but typically we want to get out there and see our position players probably play in 8 to 10 games. We're going to watch our arms throw at least 3 or 4 times. I think that's just going to give you a really good depiction of who you're going to get as a baseball player. And not that we want to see our recruits fail, but if they have some failure along the way, when you watch them, it's going to really give you some insight as to what are some of those things that you're going to expect when they show up on campus. And then when you do see them fail, you're like, all right, is this something that we're okay with? Like, these are some of the flaws that they come with. Are those things that we think that we can fix, that we can help develop? Or are they just going to be, too big to overlook that we can't recruit them? So in the meantime, like the byproduct of being able to spend a lot of time watching them is also you're spending a lot of time getting to know them. I think that's so invaluable because, we do pride ourselves on bringing in guys that are relatively like-minded, that want to come in here and that love baseball, that, want to do more than just show up to practice. Like they're going to go and, they're going to show up to practice 45 minutes early and they're going to get in the cage and they're going to take swings with one another. Or, they're going to, on an off day on Monday, like they're going to get 8 to 10 guys at the cage getting swings in. They're going to go out in the field, get ground balls in. Pitchers are going to get out and get their throwing in. So finding guys that are invested in the program and we feel like a really good character guys, like those are things that you can identify, getting a chance to watch them as frequently as you can. And listen, with the portal, like you just sometimes don't ever know. Like it's going to be tough to get a really good gauge from the previous, their previous coach at their institution, if this kid has any type of red flags or not, or if they're maybe not even interested in giving you a scouting report on them. So we really like the idea of being able to see our guys and get to know them really well, because then it gives us a really good sense of what to expect when they show up on campus.
Yeah, I would think it would be hard to trust a coach, a former coach, I guess, once his athlete is in the portal, because I would think you would get, have hard feelings about that, where you're like, hey, come on, man, like I'm not going to give you a recommendation when you're leaving my program after all the time and energy I spent recruiting and developing you.
Yeah, every coach is a little bit different with how they handle it. I know when I've had guys, whether I was at Quinnipiac or here, that have gone into the portal and coaches have reached out to me. Like I hold no ill will against those kids. Like it just kind of is what it is in the state of where we are in college athletics. So, from a personal standpoint, like I'll always be honest with that coach. I'm going to give them, total transparency into who they are as a player and as a person. But at the end of the day, like, some of these coaches that you do reach out to, you don't have a pre-existing relationship with. So I'm not going to say you take it with a grain of salt, but you do have to kind of make sure you do your own homework to get a feel for who they are as a player. And listen, some programs do a really good job at either vetting the players that they're bringing in, or they've just had a really good, system in place that has allowed them to have success with transfers. But I just think with where we're at, from a university standpoint, a program standpoint, and like I said, like how we enjoy going through the recruiting process with high school kids, it's just something that we'll always stick to unless anything significant changes. But that's kind of been our motto and our MO to this point.
Yeah, I heard somebody make the point recently, and I kind of agreed with it, that the NCAA should have different transfer rules for football and then every other sport. Because if you look at football, they have these alumni collectives where they're, raising millions and millions of dollars of these people who are like, hey, I'll pay whatever we need. If we need a new linebacker, we need a quarterback, like we're going to round up the funds. We're going to pay these guys. We're going to get the best players out there. And they just want to see their team win at all costs. So the transfer rules are kind of set up for the fans and the people who are going to put in the big money for these sports and really fund them. But whereas like other sports like baseball, where you're not going to draw, 70,000, 100,000 for the games, then maybe you should have different transfer rules where maybe you do that red shirt year, or you can't do it, you can't go twice, or whatever the rules would be. How do you feel about the rules of the college baseball game right now? Do you think they need to be tweaked?
I don't know if there is a perfect model for it, because I do understand both sides of the coin. I understand where you do get some kids that are at an institution that, is buried behind, a freshman All-American that isn't going to see the field for 3 years, or, maybe he's going to get 50 career at-bats if he ends up sticking it out. And so for guys like that, you want them to have an opportunity to play college baseball somewhere else. Obviously the other side of it is where if programs like ourselves or other like-minded programs that, go and find these kids that, are under recruited, under the radar, they end up developing in the first year or two of your program, and then they want to jump in the portal because they can, go make a few bucks elsewhere or want to go play at a higher level. Does it sit well with me? No, but it's kind of where we're at, and I don't know what the perfect recipe is to fix it. I think it is being able to give kids an opportunity to have that one-time transfer and be able to play right away. I think that's important. I don't see any reason to sit out. But for the guys that are going to bounce around from school to school, that one for me is probably where, putting in a rule where they have to sit out a year makes a lot of sense. I don't know who makes the decisions. I don't know how they sit around, sit at a round table and figure out what's best for, college athletics, just because I think it's constantly evolving. And so for me, I don't have any strong opinions about it. I just kind of go with the flow and adapt when I need to. So we kind of make sure we stay where our feet are, man. Like, we're just trying to worry about what's, in our program right now. And we're going to do our best to provide a really good atmosphere for our players. Hope they enjoy it. That we can get these guys better, win a few games, and at the end of the season, hopefully we can keep these guys coming back.
Yeah, and you're having success with that too. Just doing business the way business is being done. I wanted to go back to this because we do have so many parents reach out to us and say like, hey, there's so many options now with these travel tournaments and showcase events and, recruiting camps and clinics and all this stuff. And you mentioned you're seeing position players 8 times and pitchers, 3 or 4 times. Where are you going? Or, is it these WWBA tournaments down in Jupiter, or, Fort Myers, or what are the tournaments or showcase events where you're seeing guys?
Yeah, typically it starts. So for the kids that just entered into their junior year, one of the best events that we like to go to is Fort Myers. It's the underclass games in the fall, because that kind of starts getting kids on your radar. You get a chance to see some kids that, you want to follow up with in the spring. Maybe we have a fall camp to kind of close out, the end of the fall baseball season, where we would love to see some of these kids come up to get a gauge at where they're at and see them progress through the winter time. And again, like, follow them in the spring and the summer. And then when the summertime comes, like, we typically hit a lot of tournaments at Diamond Nation. It's a great venue because they got a lot of fields, they have a lot of games, and most of those teams are going to be within the New England region, which is obviously where we recruit. And we've developed a lot of good relationships with travel coaches and programs in the area. Northborough, the Boston Open, like, those areas tend to have a lot of tournaments. And those are like the 2 biggest pockets that we hit when it comes to tournaments. We'll venture out into Long Island too when they have tournaments out there. But those are probably the biggest events that we go to. And it has boded well for us so far. I think when we do a really good job of being able to identify some of the kids coming out of Fort Myers, be able to follow some kids in the area, even via social media. Like that's how we do get a lot of leads on guys, is just being able to scroll through the timeline and seeing different kids pop up, that allows us to kind of start that process of following them. But those are the major tournaments that we hit. And then from there, like when they leave those tournaments, they're going to play in some of these midweek games, whether it's more local to home. We'll follow up with them there as well. But I don't know if there's a perfect recipe for it, because there are so many options for, these tournament, for these teams, these parents. Again, like you said, the showcases, the on-campus clinics and camps that go on. There's a lot of decisions to be made. But what I tell kids is that you need to be, your best recruiter, like being able to reach out to coaches and send them emails and let them know that you're interested in their program. We read every email that comes through our inbox, and we try and get, back to them and respond to them, whether it's to let them know like, hey, we're done recruiting your position for 2025 or 2026, or, if at that current time we're not interested, like we'll let them know, because we want to give as much feedback to those kids to allow them to navigate the recruiting process as best as possible. But, kids have reached out to us and emailed us that we followed up with, and have ultimately, gone through the recruiting process with them. So I think at the end of the day, the kids need to be their best recruiter. They need to be able to send emails to the schools that they're interested in. And if the coaching staff isn't interested in wanting to follow up with them, and maybe it's not a program they want to be associated with anyway. But I also think the power of social media is invaluable. Like those kids being able to utilize their Twitter and Instagram to post their highlights, their videos, their progression throughout the winter time. It's an easy way to track kids, an easy way to check in on them, to see how they're doing. And that's one of honestly, the biggest tools that we use in the recruiting process.
So it sounds like timing wise, you're kind of starting the process fall of the player's junior year, and then you'll try to get out to see them in the spring or maybe the following summer. So a lot of your offers are going out, before their senior year of high school.
Yeah. I mean, our timeline tends to be a little bit slower, and this is actually like transformed over the last couple of years, in part, due to the transfer portal and the COVID years. So the one thing that I have seen is I have seen more talented kids left over, in the end of July, middle of August, that haven't been recruited, that haven't committed, that has surprised me. And it has kind of changed, the way that we look. And that's part of the reason that we feel comfortable being able to watch kids play more often, is because we're not concerned with, as many schools jumping on these kids. And we still feel like even if one or two kids may not work out, there's still plenty of talent left over. So, we'll always try and see these kids in the spring during their high school season. It just gets really hard, as with our season, and there's just so much, crossover with when they're playing and what we have going on. But, the second our season is done and they're playing in their state tournaments and the summer season starts, like we're out there and we're watching them and we're following up with them. So, like I said, I think that the transfer portal has changed a lot, both for better and for worse. But for better, I think it has allowed us to feel more comfortable allowing our recruiting process and the timeline to kind of unfold a little bit later in the summer. And I'm okay with that. Like, even if it does trickle over into the fall a little bit, our Saturday starter from last year, his name's Joe Trombley. He was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school in his junior year. He got banged up a little bit. And so he kind of wasn't being recruited as much, and we didn't really get a chance to see him much towards the end of the summer, but we started to get some calls on him, and we had him come out to a fall camp in October and got a chance to see him throw, gave him a walk-on spot and told him, like, there's a really good opportunity for you that, you can get your body and your arm back into the shape where you expect it to be. And we're going to give you every opportunity to earn innings your freshman year. And he comes out and he ends up being a weekend starter for us his freshman year, and it's like, every recruiting process can be different. But like I said, I think we've just gotten really comfortable with allowing kids to be able to play more, and not feel as pressured, as a coaching staff and as a program, to feel like we just got to go and, fill our recruiting class as early as possible. And it's very unique because it's just, you can get uncomfortable at times when you're sitting there in the early parts of July being like, man, I haven't seen what I wanted to see so far. And it's like, is this the summer where, our philosophy, it isn't really going to pan out the way that we want. And now we're kind of left with, maybe some kids that we're not really excited about towards the end of the summer. But knock on wood, like it hasn't happened yet. And that's kind of been our philosophy so far. We're going to continue to stick with it.
Yeah, and this year was a little bit different too because the NCAA announced those roster limitations. You got to get your roster size down to 34. So we even saw like a couple of New England guys that were committed to Vanderbilt all of a sudden were back on the market, in like October of their senior year because they got calls from the recruiting coordinator saying, hey, we don't have room for you anymore. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like you get punished anymore by waiting around like it used to be. Wake Forest is locking these guys up like freshman year of high school, and now you can't even do that anymore. So it's definitely changed. I wanted to ask you about obviously last year's team set the program record for wins with 35. But when you come on, this was your first job as a head coach at the D1 level, and obviously you had a plan and it panned out. But at what point did you start to think like, hey, this is working? I'm getting buy-in from players. They're seeing results, and this is all going to work the way that I want it to.
I don't know if there was ever a moment in the last 2 years where I felt like this was going to work out the way that I wanted it to work out, because it's just you're going through so many ebbs and flows throughout the entire season. And you look back on the start of last year, and we started out 0-8, right? And we had some guys dinged up, but we also had a lot of question marks. We weren't sure who was going to be our Sunday guy. We were still trying to figure out some bullpen roles, trying to figure out who our shortstop's going to be. We also knew going into last year that we lost a lot, right? We lost 17 graduate seniors or graduate kids or seniors, and all of those guys played for 3 and 4 years. So not only did we have a crop of young freshmen that we were going to have to rely on and be able to work through some of those, freshman mistakes that they're going to make throughout the year, but we also had a lot of older guys that didn't have a ton of experience, because even those guys were sitting behind some of these older guys. So, we were relatively young and inexperienced last year, and you're just kind of saying to yourself, like, how do we want this year to look? Because there was no thought that said, like, hey, we're going to win 35 games and make it to the conference championship game. Like, that wasn't, and not to say that it's not a goal every year, but, that's not necessarily the forward thinking mindset that we had. Like, we were more worried about like what is going to set ourselves up, not only to continuously get better throughout the year, but hopefully go into 2025 with a team that is ready to compete at a really high level. And to our guys' credit, like there was just these pieces that all kind of fell into place. And, fortunately for us, like I felt like we did a really good job recruiting this freshman class from last year. Yes. But even so, like they still have to come in and play well, and they still have to kind of all figure out who they're going to be as baseball players. And being a freshman in college is not easy, man. Like, because it's, you're going to go through some self-doubt when you do start to struggle a little bit. And every single one of those guys went through their struggles in some capacity, whether it was at the plate, on the mound, just kind of figuring out how to get themselves out of this spiral that they can find themselves in from time to time. And I'm sure some of them were just kind of questioning, like, am I good enough to compete at this level? And so for us, like, it was definitely having some patience and understanding that if it may not look perfect right now, but we feel good about where their talent is. These guys compete at a really high level. Like, that was one thing when I saw things start to click, where, not to say that we were going to do something special, but I knew that we were going to be able to, at least be in every game, was that their compete level was extremely high. And it didn't matter who we were playing, whether it was on the weekend, a midweek game that you just, you're on the bus for 2.5 hours, and that sometimes the mind isn't always ready to go and compete at a high level there. Like, we showed up ready to play every single game, to their credit. Like, they were the buy-in on that aspect from those guys, and being able to be mentally and physically prepared for every game and be able to put forth our best effort. Like, I try to tell our guys, we're letting go of the end result. Like, the wins and losses for me, like, they're going to kind of take care of themselves. But like, if we can do a better job at being prepared for every game, better than the other team, like, there's going to be opportunities where we're going to be able to steal wins from guys just because, we're a little bit more focused. We're a little bit more prepared than them. So, it was never a perfect recipe. And even still, as we were kind of winning some games, like there was different points in time where you just always felt like you're trying to figure some things out as you're getting towards the end of the season. But I think from a buy-in standpoint, like the guys not only were invested in themselves, but they really cared about the program, man. Like they wanted to, do something special as we started to accumulate wins and we started, kind of getting closer towards, having a chance to win a regular season title. That just kind of motivated that group last year to want to do something special. And that, listen, when you win and like things are rolling, like that buy-in tends to happen a little bit quicker. But I think just from a mentality standpoint, like it was a really tough, resilient group that allowed us to kind of have the success that we did last year. And that's where I feel really good about where the program is right now. Because when we came into this fall, like I'm trying to figure out, is our compete level still really high, and having a really good year last year, feeling good about the guys that are returning. Is this going to open up this door for some sort of complacency? That might be the scariest thing for a coach where your guys going to come in here just assuming that they're going to be good, assuming because we won, a lot of games last year and we had some success. Like, is this now where we go through the motions? Like, are they just going to show up and just kind of show up at practice and, go through the motions of our situational stuff, or, they're not going to be as motivated to want to get better? Like, are we going to have, less guys at early work getting their swings in, or less guys wanting to get ground ball work and their extra work in because they feel like it's just going to happen? And it was actually the complete opposite. Like the guys showed up, every day this fall, ready to get better individually as a team. So from what I saw last year and what I've seen so far this fall, like I'm really excited for these guys because they've really bought into each other, to be quite honest, which is exciting.
Yeah, when you were saying that, you reminded me of I was watching College Game Day for a college football Saturday at some point this fall, and Nick Saban was saying the turning point in his coaching career was he became less outcome oriented. And early in his career, all he wanted was wins, conference championships. It was all outcome. And then he said, once he started investing in the process and getting the players, to develop skills that they could use for the rest of their lives, and the players could see that, he cared about them as individuals and as a collective unit. That was really a turning point for him. So if you follow in those footsteps, you'll be doing pretty well at Sacred Heart.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but no, wholeheartedly. Like we reemphasize it to our guys, and we talk about not getting caught up in the wins and losses, just because I think when you watch the way that, a baseball game unfolds, like you can't, get too reliant on it, for the fact that, we may play great for 8 innings, and then you come out there and guy hits a 2-run homer off your closer to lose, 3-2. Like that stuff happens. But we played great for 8 innings. You know what I mean? And so for us, like that is important to emphasize to our guys. Like I'm not okay with losing, and they know that for sure, right? Like it's not okay to lose by any means. But if like I said before, if we're doing everything that we need to do when we show up to the field, going through stretch, going through a throwing program, we got our pregame, routine with ground ball work, our outfielders making throws to bases, going through BP, like that segment of preparation, investing in making sure we do that really well. When our guys go on the bases and we run the bases, like we run the bases hard before we play games, because that's how we want to play. And so if we can do that really well, and we can show up doing that more times than we're not, like we're going to feel really good about winning baseball games. And, at the end of the day, it's up to us as coaches to make sure that we're putting in a practice plan that allows for that preparation to happen. I think that's also what has helped our guys feel good about going into games, is because we've definitely set up practice to make sure that we are prepared for just about any type of scenario that can come our way. They know what the expectation is, the expectations for how we go about, all of our segments in practice, what we expect from those guys and how it translates into the game. I think being able to set those guys up that way allows them to feel better about going into these games, feel more prepared. Like that to me is one of the most important facets as a coach, but also as a player, where if you feel like you have done everything that you needed to do to prepare yourself for that moment, like that's going to help set you up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to ask you about before we get to our final segment, you have a long history in the NEC between as a player at Quinnipiac and then as a recruiting coordinator and a coach at Quinnipiac, and now 2 years with Sacred Heart. You're making the move this year to the MAAC. Does that change anything in terms of recruiting, your approach to development, anything like that, or is kind of the same philosophy?
No, same philosophy. Yeah, I think we're gonna continue to recruit the way that we have with the players that we have. I think that the MAAC is definitely going to be a little bit more challenging. It's going to be a little bit more of a deeper league. I'm excited. I'm excited for the challenge for our program and our players. It's going to be a lot of fun now playing, Quinnipiac and Fairfield in 3-game sets right down the road. I think it's going to provide for a great rivalry. And listen, I always knew as a coach when I was in the MAAC, like when you came into a weekend, it didn't matter who you were playing. Like you needed to make sure that your team was ready to play. And that, it's a challenge I'm looking forward to going into this year.
Netting Professionals is proud to be the official netting partner of the Cape Cod League and the New England Collegiate Baseball League. Netting Professionals is in the sports business of improving athletic programs one facility at a time. Netting Professionals designs, fabricates, and installs custom netting, wall padding, windscreen, batting practice equipment, and much more for high schools, colleges, commercial facilities, and stadiums throughout the United States, while providing high-quality products and great service to numerous baseball programs throughout the New England area. To learn more and to speak to a Netting Professionals representative today, visit them at nettingpros.com. Remember, when it comes to netting, it's Netting Professionals.
Are you serious about playing your sport in college? Do you need a flexible education that allows you to maintain your practice and competition schedules while also preparing you to succeed at the next level? You should check out the University of Nebraska High School. UNHS is accredited and offers more than 100 online courses, including NCAA-approved courses to protect your academic eligibility. Students could earn a UNHS diploma or take a single course for transfer credit. Courses are college prep, self-paced, and available 24/7, 365. Enroll anytime and take up to a year to complete a course. Visit highschool.nebraska.edu today.
Hey, it's Bobby Moran, Director of Athletics at Thayer Academy. You know what? Experience matters, and Thayer Academy's professional coaching staff understands how to work with each student athlete to help them succeed. Our coaches and faculty are committed to ensuring both 5th to 12th graders feel known, connected, and prepared. This is Thayer's secret sauce, nurturing each student to reach their full potential. Here, success is truly a team sport. Are you ready for your child to take the next step? See what Thayer has to offer at thayer.org. That's THAYER.org.
All right, well, let's go to our 3 Up, 3 Down segment with our producer, David Yaz.
3 up, 3 down.
Yes, it's once again time for 3 Up, 3 Down, where I have 3 questions for our 2 panelists here. They are completely unprepared. My job is to make them look silly, so let's dive right in. Since it's 3 Up, 3 Down, we're actually going to go around the horn today and talk about the greatest baseball players at certain positions, starting naturally with first base. So the question is, who's the greatest first baseman of all time, actually of the modern era? Let's not go back. Let's talk about our lifetime. Now, I'm old, so it might be different, but over the last, let's say post 1980 or so, I'm going to give you 3 choices, or you can go off the board if you want. Choice number 1, Albert Pujols, obvious choice, right? 3-time MVP, 2-time World Series champion, 11-time All-Star. Number 2, Jeff Bagwell, 449 home runs in his career. He did win an MVP, 4-time All-Star. He's in the Hall of Fame. I guess all these guys are in the Hall of Fame, obvious. Number 3, Frank Thomas, the Big Hurt, 521 home runs, 2-time MVP, also in the Hall of Fame. So Pujols, Bagwell, or Thomas, or you can go off the board if you want your choice for the greatest first baseman ever. Coach, we'll let you go first.
You put me on the spot here.
That's the whole point, Coach. Sorry.
Yeah, well, the obvious for me, I wouldn't say it's obvious, but I would definitely lean towards Albert Pujols. But I'm going to take Jeff Bagwell for two. All right. One of them being that I got an autograph from him when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
The second reason actually is because when he played college baseball, he played at my father's alma mater, University of Hartford. And not only that, but his coach when he was in college was Dan Gooley, who was my coach at Quinnipiac.
Wow. Yep. Excellent choice, and for excellent reasons.
Yep. And I was a big Bagwell fan too when I was a kid. So
why can't the Red Sox get a player like Jeff Bagwell? That's a joke. Dan, your thoughts?
I'm going to say over the length of his career, Pujols was probably the best first baseman. And his ceiling was very high. I'd say single season first base, I'd go Mark McGwire. What was that, 2001, where the 70 home runs?
70
season?
home runs,
yeah,
sure.
That was if you just left it anywhere close to the plate that year, he was just going to crush it, and he hit a lot of those like 335-foot homers right down the line, and it just didn't seem like a baseball park was big enough for him that year.
Yeah. The 60-second home run, I think it never got more than like 10 feet off the ground.
No, top spinner.
Excellent choices, both. We move to second base. I'll give you three choices, and you can go off the board again if you want to. Number one, Roberto Alomar. He was a 12-time All-Star, 10-time Gold Glove, and 2-time World Series champion. Number two, Ryne Sandberg, won an MVP, 10-time All-Star, 9-time Gold Glove. And Joe Morgan from the Big Red Machine. That goes back a little further, of course, but 2-time MVP, 2-time World Series champion, 10-time All-Star. Dan, we'll let you start on second base.
Yeah, the first name I thought of was Roberto Alomar. He had that incident where he spit on an umpire, which kind of tainted his career a little bit. But yeah, he was the best for a long time, for probably like a decade. He was. Who was the second guy that you said?
Ryne Sandberg.
Oh, Ryne Sandberg, one of the worst Phillies managers of all time. So I will not have him in my as my second baseman.
Okay, another good reason. Coach, your thoughts? Second base.
Yeah, for the sake of being boring, I'm also going to agree with Roberto Alomar. He's also the one that I saw play the most. I thought he was tough at the plate, but when you say a 10-time Gold Glover, like to me. That's what I remember him for. Like, I remember him being a great defensive second baseman. And I always feel like he always got hot in the playoffs when he was with those teams. And he had, Albert Bell, he had Manny on those teams that he played with. I enjoyed watching him play. Joe Morgan, yeah, he's unfortunately a little bit before my time. So like, it's hard to speak on him, but I always remember watching Roberto Alomar and always felt like he played at a really high level when he was playing.
Joe Morgan, great second baseman, one of the most ordinary TV broadcasters you'll ever hear.
Yeah.
Well, here comes. He's got a fastball, and he hits it, and it's a home run. Thanks for the analysis, Joe. But great player. Good answers both again. We move to third base for the final question here. The candidates are Wade Boggs, 5-time batting champion, 12-time All-Star, 2 Gold Gloves, and won a World Series with a team that was not the Red Sox. Number 2, George Brett. MVP in 1980, hit .390 one year. It was that year, actually. 3-time batting champion, 13-time All-Star. He did win a World Series champion. And, I don't know. Dan, can you think of another third baseman that maybe we admired growing up? I'm teasing Dan. It is Mike Schmidt. Mike Schmidt, 548 home runs, 3-time MVP, 10-time Gold Glove, 12-time All-Star. Did win the World Series MVP in 1980. Dan was probably in diapers, but he was still celebrating. Yes. Coach, he's a Phillies fan. Coach, your thoughts? We got Schmidt, we got Brett, we got Boggs, or go off the board on third base.
Okay, well, I grew up a Sox fan, and I loved Wade Boggs. But then he went to the Yankees, and he's infamous for, riding a horse. There's no way I could ever say Wade Boggs for that reason alone. And I'm actually going to go off script, and I'm going to say Nolan Arenado. I think what Nolan Arenado has done in his career is pretty special. And I also think in today's day and age, especially with infielders, I think the skill level has grown immensely. And for him to win as many consecutive Gold Gloves in his career that he has had, while still being as productive as he is at the plate, is something that's pretty impressive. And I wouldn't mind seeing him in a Sox uniform, to be quite honest, and pushing Devers over to first base. But, that's just me. But I think I have a tremendous amount of respect for what Arenado's done at third base.
10 Gold Gloves altogether for Nolan Arenado. Great answer. Dan, your thoughts on third base?
I like planting that seed too for Red Sox management.
Yeah.
Let's go get him.
Hope they're listening.
Yeah, of course I'm going Schmidt. And what was funny is the resume that you just gave. I used to have a VHS cassette that I used to watch all the time. It was Mike Schmidt's 500 home run chase, and then like the end they kind of tack on his retirement. But Harry Kalas announced him, the day that he got retired. They had like a whole ceremony at home plate, and he came out, waved to the crowd. But Harry Kalas did the whole 548 career home runs, 10-time Gold Glove, 3-time MVP, and you sounded just like him.
3-time MVP, 10-time Gold Glove winner. That's my best Harry Kalas. Not too good. Yeah. And Coach, I agree with you on Wade Boggs. That guy can just, take off. He did the horse thing for the Red Sox when they won the AL East pennant one year, and the next day he was quoted as saying, "This city, Boston, has a heart as big as the Prudential Center." Then later, he wins the World Series with the Yankees, gets on a horse again, and says this city has a heart bigger than the World Trade Center. So the guy has no soul. He just insert tall building here. Come on, Wade Boggs.
Yeah, also, there's not many Sox players that can go and play in a Yankee uniform that I can still have a
same.
Or maybe only Johnny Damon because of what he did and the timing that he did it in. So
I still maintain that Wade Boggs is one of the worst Hall of Famers. Hall of Famer, but one of the worst Hall of Famers. Although apparently he did drink 30 beers on one plane trip from Boston to California. That's a different Hall of Fame. Anyway, great job, Coach. Great job, Dan. Dan, back to you to wrap things up.
I thought it was like 72 beers.
Oh, maybe it was. 2 30-packs?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Wait, that's impressive.
or horrifying. Definitely one of the two.
Yeah.
Probably both. Yep.
Thanks to Sacred Heart coach Pat Egan for joining us on the Base Path podcast. Rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform. Thanks to our producer, David Yaz. The Base Path podcast is a Siemens Media production.